It was a crime so strange, cold and calculated that it united two nations in shock and despair. And with the suspect soaring to the top of Japan's most wanted list, he would deform his own face to keep his real identity hidden to the world. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to Coffee House Crime. Today we're looking at the case of Tatsuya Ichihashi and his victim, Lindsay Hawker. There are many strange and disturbing details to this case, including a body in a flower pot, plastic surgery to avoid detection, and a wild hunt for a suspect that would take police years across the entire nation of Japan to capture. So pull up a seat, grab a coffee and sit back. This is the case of Tatsuya Ichihashi. Although our story today takes us to Japan, we're starting it in England, in a city called Coventry. Coventry is located deep in the Midlands of England. Known for its medieval cathedral and, sadly, also for its destruction during World War II, Coventry has bounced back in the last few decades to become an engineering powerhouse to the United Kingdom. With easy access to both London and Birmingham, and most of the country less than a 2-hour drive away, it's a well-situated city with a lot to offer to its residents. And one of those residents was Lindsay Hawker. Lindsay was born on December 30th, 1984, to her father Bill and mother Julia Hawker. She was a happy child growing up and had two sisters named Louise and Lisa. She was schooled at King Henry VIII School, and at the end of college she ventured to the University of Leeds to study biology. She met university with academic success too, and in 2006 she achieved a first-class honours grade. Being both very serious about her future career while also being popular among her friends, Lindsay had a lot going for her. She was bright, nurturing, caring, and successful. But she also had an appetite to try something new before pursuing her master's degree, and so in mid-2006 she hatched up a plan. Lindsay decided to take a year out of a busy schedule to do a bit of travelling while she worked. She figured that a year out of education would bring a new perspective to her life. And so in October 2006, she signed up to Nova Teaching School and found herself on a plane to Japan. She had signed up to Nova, Japan's largest private English school, which recruits adults from around the world to teach the language in both Osaka and Tokyo. Nova is considered to be a prestigious assignment, and Lindsay was one of the lucky few who managed to grab a spot. After touching down in Tokyo, Lindsay was finally assigned to Koiwa, a district in the Edogawa ward of Tokyo, and she would quickly find both comfort and excitement in her surroundings. Located only 17 minutes away from Akihabara and 22 minutes away from Asakusa, there's a plethora of sights, activities and fun things to do near Koiwa. Whether you're there for food, parks, shopping, temples, or just a good drink, Tokyo has it all. She had found herself in one of the most interesting cities that the world has to offer, and she was loving it. She decided to move a little further east from Tokyo's centre to a place called Chiba. Here, the rent was cheaper. She also moved in with two other teachers, both of them also working at Nova School, and very quickly, the three would become friends. And soon after, Lindsay's time in Tokyo started to fly by. Although she was loving her time away from home, Lindsay often still thought about home. She had a loving family, a large group of friends, and a boyfriend back in England. And so with that said, the homebird often kept in contact through Facebook, Skype, text, and phone call. It was 6 months into her stay in Tokyo in March 2007 that Lindsay had an awkward encounter. She had finished work for the day and travelled back to Chiba Station before collecting her bike. As she was unlocking her bike, a man approached her from behind. When she turned around, the man greeted her by saying, "You are my English teacher." Lindsay was confused by the situation. She was sure that he was not one of her students. She awkwardly declined to comment, but the man continued following her. She jumped on her bike and began to cycle away, but still the man followed her. She sped up. His walking turned into jogging, and then his jogging into running. And with Chiba's many roads and intersecting walkways, it was almost impossible for Lindsay to escape him. He continued to strike conversation, asking Lindsay where she was from and where she studied. She still tried to shake him off though. She eventually reached her apartment, and this is where she stopped her bike. The man was known as Tatsuya Ichihashi, and he had been running after Lindsay for the entire duration back home. When he finally caught up with her, he had a proposal to make. And despite his strange performance, the offer was simple and innocent enough. Tatsuya asked Lindsay if she would be interested in providing him English lessons. He felt like he needed a little bit of help with the language. They could meet in a cafe and he would pay her generously by the hour. Lindsay politely refused. Her work schedule was busy enough, and the time she did have off was on her own terms, having fun. Tatsuya was disappointed, but he did seem to accept her answer. It was here though that he asked her one final strange question. He was thirsty after pretty much chasing Lindsay throughout the streets of Chiba. He asked her if she would politely provide him a glass of water in her apartment. Lindsay was hesitant, but reluctantly she did allow him into the apartment. Sure, he was a strange man, and he did make her feel uncomfortable, but she had 2 roommates. This was a good opportunity to indirectly show the man that she did have company at all times, and it was an opportunity for her friends to see his face, should it ever come up again in the future. They entered the apartment together, and it was inside her apartment while having his drink that he made the offer again. It came with a price tag this time. He'd pay Lindsay 3,500 yen or $32 an hour, and the interaction would be strictly business. This was an offer Lindsay couldn't refuse. Although Nova was helping her get by in Tokyo, she could do with some extra cash, and this was easy money. She agreed to his request, deciding to meet him at a coffee shop a few days later. Tatsuya was appreciative, and he thanked Lindsay for the offer. Before he'd leave her apartment though, he wanted to give her one last thing. He whipped out a pen from his back pocket and grabbed some scrap paper, and then he started scribbling something. A few moments later, he handed her the note. It was a sketch he had just drawn. One of Lindsay. And along the sketch was his name and his phone number. Tatsuya Ichihashi was a 28-year-old man from the city of Ichikawa, also located in Chiba Prefecture. He was born in Gifu Prefecture on the 5th of January 1979, and initially grew up there before moving to Chiba. He was born into a successful family. His father was a medical doctor at a local hospital in Chiba, while his mother was also a professional dentist. In his younger years, Tatsuya had ambitions to follow his father's footsteps in becoming a medical doctor. But when he failed his exams and was denied in advancing his studies, he settled for a degree from the Department of Horticulture. He graduated from Chiba University in 2005, and although he passed his degree relatively well, Tatsuya did not make effort to find any work. Instead, he lived on an allowance of 100,000 yen or $920 a month from his parents. And this is where we learn a little more about the dark half of Tatsuya Ichihashi. Tatsuya had no previous convictions with the law, but he had been the subject of an allegation of prior theft and injury. Allegedly, he had assaulted a woman on the street during a robbery, but the matter had been settled out of court. It is alleged that his father paid the woman off with around 1 million yen or $10,000. He was also described as a loner with an obsession for physical fitness. Tatsuya regularly attended his local gym, and he often cycled over 25 kilometers every day. In addition to this, Tatsuya was known to be a little reclusive, rebellious, and had no intention to find any work. And with only $900 a month to get by, were weekly sessions at $35 an hour really that sustainable? Back to Lindsay's apartment though. After handing her the sketch with his name and his number, Tatsuya thanked Lindsay for her time and the glass of water. He wished her well, until they'd meet a few days later. Fast forward several days, and it is now Saturday the 24th of March 2007. Lindsay had contacted Tatsuya a couple days prior, and they'd arranged for their first English lesson in a local coffee shop. CCTV captured the two conversing while in the queue to grab a drink. Lindsay seemed relatively relaxed, but she did make clear steps backwards whenever Tatsuya moved too close. The pair sat and spoke for what is assumed to be a little over an hour, and progress was good. At the end of it though, Tatsuya awkwardly pointed out that he'd forgotten his money. "No worries," he said, "I only live half a mile down the road. Why don't you come by and grab your money, and then be on your way?" Lindsay agreed, and so the two hopped into a taxi. Lindsay hadn't brought a bike with her that day, and she also had work later on in the afternoon. So when she arrived at Tatsuya's, she asked the taxi driver if he'd be so kind to wait for her. He agreed, and so Lindsay followed Tatsuya into his apartment. Several minutes later though, Lindsay still hadn't returned. That's a little strange, the taxi driver thought, but maybe she's had a change of plans. No worries, and so on that note, he left, completely forgetting about the incident. Lindsay failed to show up to work late that afternoon, however. And even worse, she never made it back to her apartment either. Her housemates, already noting that she wasn't at work that day, started to worry about Lindsay. They called the police later that night to report her missing. But Saturday turned into Sunday, and Sunday turned into Monday. The family and friends of Lindsay back home in the United Kingdom were already starting to grow worried over her radio silence. It was only after Monday though, when she missed a second day of work, that panic really started to set in. The school contacted her parents to let them know that she had now missed 2 days in a row, and straight after that they contacted